Hello everybody, I'm Mike the Man. Welcome to my channel. In an embedded confession, the subject usually references an accusation and then quickly moves into his or her own language, giving you actual events as they have taken place. So what the person is doing is not doing, he is not quoting somebody. Police said, "We are investigating the McCains for the possibility that..." No. What they are doing is referencing the accusation or the people, the potential accuser, or they speak directly to them. When somebody says, for example, "Well, I guess you think that after I left the house, I went through the back door, I went upstairs, then I killed my wife, then I took my time for 2 hours to clean everything up, and then I exited through the back door and went around the block and came through my front door to make sure that I was seen, and people assumed I just gotten back from the game." Something like that. And it happens all of the time. That somebody says, "Well, so let me get it straight. You probably think that..." And people tell you actually what they did. And in these cases, the experiential memory takes over and they tell you very flawlessly what actually they did, and they feel comfortable doing it because they are masking it as somebody else's accusation. And with it, when they do that, they often want to test what you know about the case, how you perceive what they state. They will bring a denial with it. In the case of Gerry McCain, for example, after it, he talked about how would we have done that? How would we have had time? The first one is by Gerry McCain, and you can see it on Richard D. Hall interviews Peter Hyatt, an 8-year-old video that I have recently rewatched. And here is what Peter Hyatt rightfully called the embedded confession, also known as the crown of statement analysis. I mean, that's my term that I'm coining. The crown of an analysis is when you work your way towards it. And if you watch that video with Peter Hyatt and Richard D. Hall, the embedded confession comes towards the end, which is not unusual. Masked as a denial or even as an absurdity. The subject wants to get it off their chest what police may think or what they feel accused of. Sometimes they are the ones who introduce a scenario that hasn't even been a part of the accusation. But this is exactly what's coming to their mind at the moment, what they could be guilty of, what they are guilty of. Gerry McCain says, "I suppose what's been purported from Portugal is that..." And I already cut it off after that, because now the embedded confession begins. He says, "Madeleine died in the apartment by an accident and we hid her body." And I believe his language. He is telling us in his own language what had happened to Madeleine McCain. Then Gerry moves into, as I have already mentioned, asking, how could I have done this? There was not enough time. You mean we went out to meet our friends, then we checked on her, and then an hour later we checked on them again, the kids again, and how would we have had time? And of course a suggestion that Richard introduced within the video was, well, a lot of people think that she may have passed away a long time before that, and that the meeting at night was actually like an alibi the establishing of an alibi, that she had previously died, and Peter agreed, and so do I, having watched it and having had the statements right there on the screen. He inserted the video clips of them giving the statements, and then you had the statements right up there while Peter was speaking and analyzing it. And the purpose was trying to make what happened sound like it couldn't have had happened. With questions, with pauses, wanting to see how does the interviewer react? What do they know? What questions may they come up with? How far ahead are they in their investigation? Is the interviewer going to say, well, police, we just had police tell us that it could have been done yesterday because you were seen doing this or that. You see, they're moving forward pretty systematically after people give an embedded confession. There is a reason, a purpose behind it, because that is the one thing that they don't want you to think is possible. So it's almost like gaslighting the public. I suppose what's been purported from Portugal, okay, has it been purported or not? What's your source? I suppose. So he already makes it sound like, is that all they got? What a bunch of nonsense. But then he moves into his own language and he says, Madeleine died in the apartment by an accident and we hit her body. So he told us several things. Madeleine is dead. She died in an apartment, in the apartment. Not somewhere out there. She never made it out. She never got abducted. It was an accident. And the language of the mother also suggests that. Because she talks about we were cuddling, which may have occurred after she already passed. There was still unity between her and her daughter. It would have not been the case had it been on purpose, had they killed her on purpose. They haven't. And when they talked about disposing, how would we have disposed of the body, and then they turned it from disposed of to hidden, and that it was actually respectful language. He didn't say, how would we have dumped the body, or anything like that. This was Gerry McCain's, in my opinion, his embedded confession, where he told us what happened that night. And embedded confessions are very important. We cannot miss them. Even if they're partial confessions. When somebody introduces what happens, wants to be the first one to introduce something that happened, and then see your reaction. Or then try to explain to you why that could not be the case. They feel a need to tell you what happened, but with the premise, there is absolutely no way. Do not look into this direction, because you may ask yourself, why would they do that? Why would people do that? It's very simple, because this is the closest you can get to the truth in one sentence. And they would rather be the ones introducing it to you with the opportunity to let you know why. They want you to think it could have not taken place. And people do it all of the time. Look for the embedded confession every time somebody, a person of interest or a suspect, is making a statement, is being interviewed. People have a tendency to tell you what actually took place. We are not that complex. Even though the McCains are intelligent people, they're both doctors. And of course the question was, why would they not have called the police about it being an accident? Because A, she was already passed. They realized she was no longer with us. So there was no need for an ambulance. There was no need for any of that. There was nothing left to do to help her. And Kate, right? Kate McCain, her language reveals that there was not once that she called out to a potential kidnapper, and no urgency. She sat there and she reminisced a lot. She was very nostalgic about her daughter in other interviews. And nostalgia, when nostalgia is being introduced by the parents of a missing child, that indicates that there is no future to focus on. They don't say, I can't wait, we need to find him, he's gonna come back. They don't go into the I want people to remember him kind of stuff at all. Forget the past. I want him back. We are living now. I want my son in my future. That's what would be expected from Katie Proudfoot. And just like Kate McCain, she failed to do that. She has not done any of the things expected from the mother of a missing child. No concern expressed about how is he doing right now. Is he cold? Is he starving? Is he being abused? Is he crying for me? None of that. Because the McCains, they have processed the death of Maddie. They are past that. Which is why they seem calm. And yes, they have mourned. But they have mourned quickly and probably mourn in private. And the reason, of course, they don't want you to know. They don't want law enforcement to know what took place, because they can, first of all, lose their freedom, because as physicians, if it comes out that they have over-medicated the children simply so they can go out and have fun, don't need a babysitter, that could lead to criminal prosecution. Especially in their case, because they should know how much to administer. But again, in the same interview, Gerry McCain introduced also a fall. The same way Katie Proudfoot has done twice. Did you fall out of bed? And at the later time she uses the language, don't let his face fall to the bottom of the feet. It is a very strange way to put it. Just like bulldozing him down with hugs. And in this particular case, the bulldozer reference kind of stands on its own right now. But the face falling to the bottom aligns with, did you fall out of bed? And later on Chris Proudfoot saying, is he on the other side of the bed? Which was also a strange comment, right? So when we listen to the language repeatedly used what we can detect are the pieces to the puzzle where we have not yet seen where they fit, but they are now starting to fit. So the puzzle pieces that are important, the flags, we put them in a certain spot where they are always in front of us. And we say, this is out of the norm. This is not normal. There's something, either somebody gives us information that is not necessary, unnecessary information, or there could be a denial that seems, well, it starts off reliable, but after the no, I didn't do it, the sentence continues with word after word after word, and sometimes something else is introduced. So they didn't want the police to know what happened, because they could have faced criminal prosecution. They could have lost their license to practice medicine. And even in this case, it may not have, we don't know how much it was that she was administered, because Gerry McCain introducing the fall indicates she was able to get up at one point and got out of bed, fell. Maybe she hit her head on the bed on somewhere and passed away from that. And I've stated it before, when you sleep in a natural state, or you get tired and you start to fall asleep, you adjust yourself so you're comfortable in bed. But have you seen how people, back in the days, the early days of the internet, I guess, you saw a lot of pictures of people being passed out drunk in all types of different positions. Well, it's not that different from taking too much sleep aid. On these days, you see the fentanyl zombies on the street that are passing out in all kind of positions. So it is easier to simply fall asleep in an awkward position, because you're all of a sudden so unbelievably tired. You may one minute sit up, play with your toys, and then just lean back, and so it could have been a nerve gets cut off, or your leg falls asleep. So in such a state, a child would jump out of bed, the legs may give in, and she may have jumped off that bed several times successfully, but not in that moment. This is just what I'm thinking. This is just my opinion. This is just how it's playing out in my mind. And this particular interview by Richard D. Hall, the interview conducted with the McCains that's being referenced in his video, that is not the only one. I have examined the McCains extensively, especially back then. But everything sort of goes back to this one analysis by Peter Hyatt. And I don't know if he picked this particular interview and said there's a lot here, or if Richard picked it, but that one was packed with all the right information. So they didn't want to, and I'm saying this because a lot of people ask, well, why didn't they just call the police? Same with Summer Wells. I believe there was an accident at the waterhole, and Candace introduced rocks. Hunter only said she went underwater 10 or 15 seconds there. She struggled, or he wasn't that sure about the timeline, but he said that Candace and her mother were yapping it up on the side. Well, is that the whole family was negligent with their children in general. But would that have been a criminal thing not to notice? No, because you cannot watch your child all the time. And yes, accidents take place, but the people, like Candace, in her case, she didn't want police to come to the house, see how the children lived, examine them further. They had already CPS problems. I think their children are taken away now. they figured, you know what, and they didn't trust police. They always had problems with police because of their lifestyle. So people like that often, people in such situations often say, by no, when the child is deceased and they realize that she was probably dead next to the milk cartons, she probably realized or said, you know what good is police gonna do me now? Because I can't call I don't need an ambulance because my daughter's already gone. By the way, do I need to give a trigger warning? No, it's true crime, right? Be warned when it comes to my entire channel. So then there were 17 messages that Hunter has seen. He has seen the number, 17 messages between her and her drug dealer, with the last message being, it's done. So now, of course, Candace could be held criminally accountable for getting rid of the body and whatever was associated with it. So now there's not gonna be anything new likely from her. Maybe one day in the future, I do not know. But she would have to first be clean. Because again, people like that do not want police. They do not want... They also believe police is not going to believe me anyways because I had so many problems with them. They're going to arrest me. They're going to do something to me. That's how a lot of people who are in that type of world think. The paranoia. Actually, in this case, yeah, police probably didn't like them. Police probably had a lot of problems with them, so it's... How do they say? Just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching me? Something like that. It is different in the case of Gerry McCain and his wife, who are prominent or fairly prominent members of their societies. But they could have lost that status if it came out that their own daughter died as a result of Madeleine being over-medicated. They would have had to do an autopsy. They would have said, yep, this is not acceptable, and both of you will lose your income and your reputation and your status. Then we may criminally charge you, which probably in that case, I don't think there would have been incarceration, but still, the humiliation of being taken away and having to defend yourself for your freedom, in addition to mourning your child. And third, these other children would have been taken away also, just like maybe in the case of Summer Wells. They didn't want to lose their other children. They didn't want to be investigated. They didn't want maybe they didn't want their children to be tested for drugs, because maybe it would have come out that they too at one point recently had been given some kind of aid to go to sleep, be it cough syrup or something stronger, worse. So questions like these are natural to come up a lot. Why didn't they just tell the truth? But you see, then the machinery began, and it was no longer possible for them to turn back and say, okay, I lied. Because suddenly it became an international event and they went with the flow. The detectives came from the UK there to help them. They didn't want this to turn into something that would make upstanding members of their society appear unfavorable. Is that what it is? I am not going to get into what Sonia Polton talked about on my channel, but these are all speculations, and I don't go by speculations. I look for the conclusions. So now we have a second embedded confession from John Ramsey. And that was the strangest thing that I today by accident came across a Q&A with John Ramsey, and I thought, let me check this one out, because I planned this video for a while. And synchronicity. The first question, there was a police officer or a law enforcement professional. He was maybe an FBI agent even, I'm not sure. But he talked about, we have so many cases at the same time, and these cases, the strangest one, and we have so many cases where people stage the crimes. He asked a lot of different questions. A lot of questions in one. And the first thing that he said was, "My condolences." And I do believe it's appropriate, because John Ramsey didn't do anything. He did lose his daughter, and so did Patsy Ramsey. Patsy Ramsey lost her daughter. If you have watched my video or my several videos on the Ramseys, I analyzed a very quick statement from Patsy Ramsey when she was at the police station. And what she said was, "I didn't do it. Full stop. Point. Sentence over. I didn't do it." That is a very powerful and strong denial. And then she said, John Ramsey, she used his full name, John Ramsey didn't do it. Full stop. Point. Sentence finished. That is a very powerful statement, and I believe it. She is reliable there. She could have said, "I didn't do it. Why would you think my daughter, I loved her, and what about her father? He also loved her, and blah." No. I didn't do it. Powerful, stands on its own. John Ramsey didn't do it. The same. And of course she left out Burke. I have spoken also about Dr. Phil interview, that I believe that he is in a permanent state almost of duping delight, which probably started the moment she died, John Benet. And I have given you guys reasons why he may have hated her so much. Because I think, because from what I have seen, examining the language of Patsy, that the treatment of his, the change was beyond what is expected. We have sibling rivalries and jealousies and all of these things, but that when this blonde girl, as she said in the 911 call, the operator asked who's missing, and she said she's 6 years old, she's blonde, she's 6 years old. That's the first thing that came to mind after giving her age. And Patsy had a short-lived career. I think she was Miss West Virginia, right? Was that it? And I looked up who was Miss America in these years, in 77 and 78. And both of them had blonde hair. So she had dark hair. And I have concluded that she may have felt that not having blonde hair was a disadvantage for her. So when her blonde little child was born, probably her old hopes got reignited, and she thought, now I'm coming back. And it's like, Carl Jung said it, that The biggest burden a child has to bear is the unfulfilled dreams of the parents, where the parents are neglecting their child for those dreams when they think they have a chance to live these dreams or relive them or make them happen for them. So I think that in Burke's case and John Benet's case, the change was extreme. And John Ramsey, not from him, but John was always busy. He was a businessman. He was probably always he had a couple of days here with the family, then he had to go back to Atlanta, or he was always on the move. But I think that the love that she had for Burke, and John had older children. Burke was her first, Patsy's first. And I don't think the love had ever changed, but it was just on the back burner. I think she showered him with love and affection and constantly being there. And I think when his sister was born, all of that, all of a sudden, went completely away. And her obsession kicked in. So I want to also make clear that I am saying in the case of statement analysis, judgment is not good to be a part of that. It's good to simply look at their language and also present something from their perspective, even though it's criminal or could be criminal. Which in the case of the Ramseys, yeah, they have misled and lied to police. Police can lie to you. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing at all, because that has at many times led to the capture of a guilty person when the police had no more possibility to move forward. So Burke, that's the police. So John Ramsey now goes ahead and he says to us, that's the police theory that, and now here it begins, the embedded confession, and he's telling us what happened. Burke hit his sister and killed her, and then we, to protect Burke, staged this whole strangulation, ransom note, craziness. And I could not agree anymore. That was my conclusion from the analyses. And now we're going to number 3, and that is Chris Proudfoot. He talked about Sebastian went out of that door. He said, stepped off the porch, unnecessary language. The porch is sensitive, that's a flag. Maybe that's where he passed away. When Katie said, and he's already, same like Chris Watts, towards the neck, and she ran into the house. He never made it past the porch alive. That's what he is telling me. And then he says he walked out of the door. That's what I think, and that's what I know. If you know, you don't need to tell us that you think that. He was worried about being asked, how do you know? So after he says, that's what I think, he watered it down a little bit. He went straight for it and said, that's what I know. Because think didn't seem strong enough to Chris. He wanted to double down, and sure enough, the follow-up question was, how do you know? You were not there. Katie was asleep and said, after she fell asleep, it must have happened. Even though after she said she fell asleep, everything was all right. How would she know everything was okay? Because she wasn't asleep. Now, it's been brought to my attention that Melissa Proudfoot might be working for if not as a 911 operator, somewhere in that line, and that the Proudfoots were advised to call the non-emergency line to bypass a lot of the regular proceedings that would happen when you report your child missing. So I would be very interested in what was said in the call. I don't know if it was recorded. Who knows? We may never hear it. But it seems to me that Katie may have brought up or may have tried to make it sound like she saw him run away, making it 100%. And looking at the language that she may have created for Melissa Proudfoot, she probably told them, my son is verbally autistic, we don't communicate, I have no idea what's going on. Through his head, he just ran away. She may have not even said exactly what the time was or the timeline. She may have said he ran away. She may have played the hysteria game. You see, as a matter of fact, she was on mute when they called, and Chris was doing the talking. So after that was when she spoke with the investigators. And this could have been the story that she told them. And Chris repeated. Chris didn't repeat necessarily anything that she said because he already knew what happened. They may have come up together with a good strategy. What are you going to tell them? And he said, my wife saw Sebastian just run away, and can you please come and look for him? They had to call law enforcement. They couldn't just sit there and pretend nothing is happening and call law enforcement too late. They knew this would make them a suspect, make them suspects immediately, even more so than now, than already. But this could have been done in a very clever way, and that would be Katie Proudfoot's style, where Chris can later say, I'm so sorry, I heard it wrong, my wife was calling me hysterical, she was screaming, she was crying, I couldn't make out the exact sentences of hers, so I'm not misleading you, I just thought she saw Sebastian run away. Who knows? Because later they felt the need to clarify he's not a runner, so they may have told them a different story. Chris may have said something other than that. So they did feel a need to correct certain things. And they made, and the Melissa statement said, he's verbally autistic. And then later Katie says, now, people got the wrong impression of my son. And he was real together, and he was really, he just had some social inabilities. Otherwise he was alright. There was nothing really as wrong with him as the public may think so, but that came from them. That was the impression that was given to us, and it was given to us for a reason, to make the unreasonable sound possible, because that's what they were going for. Anything that was possible. So Chris Proudfoot makes these statements and is met with, of course, opposition, even by people who like to have him on, and that gets them a lot of viewers. So they're not going to attack him, but even these people say, listen, just tell us how you know. And Chris gets extremely defensive, as he does when he realizes he doesn't have the skills to talk himself out of a situation. That's when he gets loud. And that area is just as sensitive as it is when he uses words he cannot pronounce properly and that seem out of place because they're not part of his speaking pattern, because that's when he introduces a script. Chris says, now if you are trying to insinuate that And again, after that, here it comes. Someone was in my house or someone took him outside of my house. Just say that. Why would you be defensive about that? That would mean maybe I was a kidnapper and you guys are not at fault, except someone he is trying to protect. He knows who that someone is. Is it a family member or himself? Let's find out more. Someone was in my house or someone took him outside of my house. I believe you. Of course, if you've watched my previous videos, especially who caused Sebastian Rogers' disappearance, you will realize that I've concluded that he fell out of bed and hit his face on the ground around 10 p.m. He was injured at least. This possibility they do not want to have looked at, that anybody was in the house. No, he ran away. Do not examine anything. Don't look for what is missing. Don't take fingerprints. Don't do luminol, which they didn't do because they knew how to bypass all of these procedures. They simply said my son ran away, and they made it sound credible enough. And now, in either this or another interview, Seth Rogers talks with Chris on the air and says that there's a rumor going around that somebody on a Sunday saw your mother's car parked on Worsham. Chris goes off on him. And he said, you know damn good and well that my mother wasn't with Katie on Sunday, and he introduces Sunday night. She wasn't with them, or she wasn't at the house, or she wasn't around them Sunday night. He is introducing Sunday night because Sunday night is critical. And they were at their house on Sunday night, which I do believe they were, at least partially, at part of the night. But what about Monday early morning hours? Because the lights we have seen, different channels tried to discredit them. And it wasn't a trash truck, there was a car, and we saw two people with lights moving into opposite directions. And it was not a neighbor's boyfriend, or as somebody tried to make. No, that has not been established at all. Whose car was that? Who was that? And then Chris yells at Seth and says, if you think that, if you be a responsible adult, pick up the phone and call my mother. But why would Seth do that? Why would you, if your child is missing, call a potential person of interest? And yeah, some of you would probably do it, but you know what? They're going to deny it. It doesn't mean anything. Whether or not they did it, or whether or not they were there, they would deny it anyways. And probably keep you on the phone a long time, and maybe tell you things you later on, sometimes too late, find out was not the case. This could be a big waste of time. Chris, once again, wants to make sure that nobody out there hears anything when they get closer to what happened. And everything I'm saying, by the way, is my opinion and my opinion only, people. Please draw your own conclusion. Use my videos as a tool as you are advancing in statement analysis. Make up your own minds. Feel free to disagree with me. I don't care. Because statements are powerful and they can stand on their own. I do not participate in arguments because it's useless. Arguments, it's like the war of the mice. Just meaningless, well, I think this and I think no. We have this tool and we can tell you certain things. Sometimes we can paint the whole picture and it's all coming very clearly. So Chris, anything related to his mother is sensitive. Anything about Worsham Street is a street or avenue or road, I don't know. Anything on Worsham is also sensitive. Chris is guiding us towards this direction. He loves